Canada is often the punching bag for many a joke. Canada is just America Junior. Canada is too nice. Canada is nothing but forests. And while the Canadians may have a few obstacles in their way, the country has tremendous potential to be so much more than just the US's non-offensive neighbor. But before we go any further, let's take a moment to thank today's sponsor, Conflict of Nations. Conflict of Nations is a free-to-play online PvP strategy game that lets you take control of a country, build an army using several land, navy, and air units, and fight up to 128 players in real-time games that test your strategic planning and can last for weeks. Now you can take the game wherever you go, since you can play with the same account on both PC and mobile. Play as Canada and take over the world. Show those self-righteous countries who's boss. I think you'll really appreciate the over 100 beautifully modeled modern weapon systems such as the nuclear ballistic submarine, combat attack helicopters, stealth strike fighters, airborne infantry units, and many more. If you enjoy Geopolitics, you'll have a blast playing this game. Follow the link in the description to get 13,000 gold and a 1-month premium subscription absolutely free, but this offer is only valid for 30 days, so don't miss out. Now, back to the video. Canada at present faces a number of issues which prevent it from reaching greater heights. Firstly, and perhaps most obviously, is Canada's population, which stands at only 38.5 million. This places Canada well below much geographically smaller countries like South Korea, Britain, and the Philippines. In fact, when we look at population density, Canada actually ranks in the bottom 10, with only 11 people per square mile. Compare this with the US just to its south, who boasts 93 people per square mile, or the demographically similar Britain with 700 people per square mile. That population is also on track to shrink, as the Canadian fertility rate stands below the bare minimum 2.1 replacement rate at only 1.4. You'll also find that the majority of this population isn't well distributed across Canada either, but densely clustered in the lower southeast, with the second largest cluster being concentrated close to the border with the United States in the west, stretching to the west coast, where again you find a great clustering of people, but the rest of the country is, relatively speaking, empty. In terms of economics and defense, Canada is fairly dependent upon the United States, who contributes to more than half and nearly 3/4 of total Canadian trade. The United States shares a massive demilitarized border with Canada, and the US's overall projection of military might creates an essential shield around Canada and ensures their security as a mere consequence of American security. Militarily, Canada ranks alongside countries like Taiwan, Ukraine, and Poland, but still pales in comparison to their southern neighbor, who boasts the most formidable military in the world. A lack of direct adversaries and the security provided by the US has allowed Canada to neglect its independent military development and instead draws upon innovations produced by the US and UK, with whom it has established numerous intelligence sharing, interoperability training, and strategy development organizations. Though that being said, the Canadians have, since 2007, put forward a handful of independent military modernization programs. Canada's population is just too small, too localized, and growing too slowly, or rather shrinking too steadily, to make effective use of its advantages. But now, what are those advantages? And how exactly might Canada overcome its disabilities to seize a more prestigious place for itself in the world? Let's take another look at that population density. Now, for an average-sized country like Germany or France, that 11 per square mile might be a really bad sign. But Canada is massive. It is the second largest country on the planet by geographic size, and the largest when factoring in water area. Within this bountiful and largely untapped land, we find an abundance of hydrocarbons, that is petroleum, coal, and natural gas, making the country one of the most energy-rich in the world, ranking ahead of Russia and just behind Saudi Arabia. Canada is one of the top 4 uranium-producing countries on the planet, regularly alternating with Australia for 3rd place, not to mention producing an abundance of precious elements like gold, diamonds, and silver. Canada's land also includes an enormous coastline along the Arctic Ocean and boasts the second most Arctic ports of any country, standing only behind Russia. Long disregarded as a relatively useless territory, the Arctic in recent years has become an area of tremendous interest by the global powers as new technologies and discoveries, along with changing environmental circumstances, have opened up new possibilities in the field of energy extraction, defense, and trade. It's believed that the Arctic houses a minimum of 10% to a maximum of 40% of the world's undiscovered oil and natural gas reserves, not to mention copper, iron, diamonds, and phosphate to name a few, which in previous years have been costly and inconvenient to exploit, but now in great part thanks to persistent exploration by Russia, have shown to be an immensely valuable investment which could shift the global balance of financial and strategic power. Canada has largely slowed its exploration efforts in the Arctic during the late 20th century, but interest has been reignited since Russia began further exploring and asserting its claim over disputed Arctic territories in 2007. Additionally, with the Northwest Passage having become widely navigable in 2009 on account of receding pack ice and improvements to shipping, there have been calls by international bodies and foreign powers for Canada to concede its sovereignty over the route and allow it to exist as an international passageway. The Canadians have firmly hesitated to do so, but have lacked an ability to enforce their claims over this and the deeper Arctic where Russia is advancing. As such, the Canadians began developing new Arctic warships known as the Harry DeWolf class offshore patrol vessels. As of September 2022, 1 is in service, 3 have been completed, and 5 are still under construction. These ships will serve to patrol and protect Canadian claims in the Arctic from Russia, the US, and other foreign powers, as well as prevent the use of the Northwest Passage by criminal organizations, and may mark the first steps of Canada toward great power status in this future geopolitical battleground. In the words of the former Canadian Prime Minister, Canada has a choice when it comes to defending our sovereignty over the Arctic. We either use it or lose it. And make no mistake, this government intends to use it. Because Canada's Arctic is central to our national identity as a northern nation. It is part of our history, and it represents the tremendous potential of our future. Aside from its access to the Arctic, Canada also finds itself in a highly valuable geographic location. Like the US, Canada is a continent-sprawling state, connecting 2 oceans with its borders and linking both ends by road and railway, terminating in major port cities. Canada stands as the geographic center of the English-speaking world and could very well serve as a nexus point between the US, Britain, Australia, the Caribbean, and New Zealand. Except, of course, for the fact that the US occupies that role at present, though seemingly not through its own desire, nor to the pleasure of the other countries involved who find greater kinship with one another, and Canada especially. The United States has long held a special relationship with Britain and the former empire, but at present finds itself at a crossroad between deeper investment in globalism and an essential reasserting of itself as the sole superpower, and the alternative of returning to a state of relative isolation now that Europe has recovered from the wounds of the Great Wars, allowing the world to return to a state of multipolarity. Britain and the former dominions retain an interest in global involvement, and through their special partnership and the potential emerging of a new union between them, there is a clear interest in global affairs through the respective geographic location of each. Britain, the arm of the Atlantic and Europe, Australia and New Zealand, the arm of the Pacific and Asia, with none other than Canada at their center, readily available to receive Australian and New Zealand shipping from the west and British shipping from the east, and able to transport these goods either over railway or via the Northwest Passage. The emergence of an Anglosphere union encompassing these 4 countries would have substantial benefits for Canada, benefits which mend some of the weaknesses previously mentioned. Dependence on American trade recedes if Canada allows itself to become a new hub of trade between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, while free movement arrangements would encourage population migration from densely populated Britain especially to the economically booming country with more than enough land for newcoming settlers. Of course, this would demand active engagement from the Canadian government to promote this outcome, including further infrastructure development as well as improvement, an updating of Canada's rail system to something more high speed, and with new stops along several inland towns and cities would go a long way to creating a more evenly populated country and one with a thriving competitive trade economy. More people and more infrastructure means more manpower to extract more resources and put them to use, more manpower to enforce Canada's claims to increasingly desired assets. Canada has a long road ahead and much work to do if it wishes to emerge as a great power, or even to defend what it already has from encroaching Russia, from the overpossessive United States, and from various other countries who underestimate it. But it is also difficult to not feel optimistic when left looking at the potential the country has at its fingertips. It need only make the effort to turn that potential into action. Thanks again to Conflict of Nations for sponsoring today's video. Follow the link in the description to get 13,000 gold and a 1-month premium membership at sign-up. The US of Z thanks for watching, support your legion by liking the video, or join our ranks by subscribing for more. Mr. Z, out.